what happens is we become victims to our environment because we are allowing the external world. So we come to work, we're stuck in traffic, and your colleague says to you, you know, what's up? And you say, oh, I'm having a bad day. And they ask you why you're having a bad day. And you can say, oh, well, I was stuck in traffic, I saw the news. And what we're saying is something external outside of us is having power over how we think and how we feel.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling. Today's podcast is with Dr Vish Ramakonar, and she has been on our podcast before on episode 13 where she shared her personal story. She's got an amazing CV. She is a university professor at Edith Cowan University. She also has her own consultancy called Neurochange Solutions, and that's what she's going to be speaking about today with us. And she's got a PhD in engineering and telecommunications and an incredible CV. The best way to contact Vish is either through LinkedIn, so Vish, V-I-S-H, Ramakonar, R-A-M-A-K-O-N-A-R. And she also has a website, which is www.doctor, so D-R-V-I-S-H-R-A-M-A-K-O-N-A-R.com. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did, and definitely give the exercise, the breathing exercise that we do, make sure that you stop and do it because it's a very powerful exercise, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Well, Vish, it's fantastic to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you've got the honour of being the first guest that we've ever had as a return guest, which is great for us as well, Di, because it means we've done enough episodes to have a return guest.
Vish, it's lovely to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
So Vish spoke in episode 13 about a lot of your personal story and how through tragedy and basically your body kind of telling you there's a lot going on here, that led to your personal journey of healing and transformation. And towards the end of that podcast, you talked about how you did some very specialised training with Dr Joe Dispenza. And so Vish and I caught up a week or so ago, and I was talking to her about how season 2 in the podcast is about building our listeners' courage and resilience. And as we were talking, I realised, gosh, Vish has got a lot to offer through this work with Joe Dispenza. So welcome, Vish, and I'll hand over to you to talk about your change program, which is called Change Your Mind, Create New Results program.
Oh, thanks so much, Di, and Donna for having me back again. It's I didn't realise I was the only return guest so far. Yeah, what an honour. So I have been trained by Dr Joe Dispenza himself to deliver this program called Change Your Mind, Create New Results. He has spent the last 25, almost 30 years actually, studying how the brain works and looking at ways that we can harness the power of the brain to create desirable and sustainable change in our lives. And he's got some best-selling books. One of the books is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and he was getting a lot of requests from organisations to come in and do some consulting work around these teachings to help organisations, you could say, change their mindset to have more of a growth mindset, become more resilient, and ultimately change the culture of the organisation. And I think, he was getting more and more requests, so he decided that he was going to create a program based on this stuff, based on Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, that book specifically, and start training others to deliver this program so that we can reach more and more organisations and more people. So I think in my first podcast, I might have explained to you all that I came across this work in 2019.
Just before COVID, you said you got the plane back in time.
Yes, that's right. So that's when I was trained in Palm Springs in February 2020. And I came back and went through the certification process, and I started training people. For the past 5 years, I've been running public courses for people from all industries, all walks of life. I've trained doctors, lawyers, engineers, performing arts people, you name it. I've trained nurses, and it's very, very humbling. I've even recently trained an Indigenous community in this work, because the main premise of what the program covers is we teach 2 models and 4 tools to help people have, I guess you could say, something in their toolkit that can help them become more resilient, to move through challenging situations and look at them as more as opportunities for growth. And it can help them through creating some kind of desirable change in themselves. Now, why do we say creating change? Ultimately, when we're perhaps not as happy in our life as we'd like to be, or we're facing a challenging situation, it's often that it's not the external circumstance that we can change. Often we may not have control over that. So what can we do? Can we still empower ourselves to navigate that challenging situation with more grace and more resilience and more courage, as what the theme is of your podcast? And so this program provides tools for people to do that. So instead of looking at a challenge and feeling defeated or feeling helpless that they can't do anything about it, we give them tools to change their mindset, to start looking at a problem as more as an opportunity. And so it comes from basically neuroscience. It's based on neuroscience, and one of the things we tell people is that one part of the brain, which is called the neocortex, it might look like the walnut with the folds and the valleys. Our brain is actually an archive of the past. It's a reflection of everything that we've learned and experienced up until this point. And every person that we've interacted with, every object that we've had some kind of exchange with, every time and every place has been etched, is now stored here in the form of neurological networks. So you may have a neural network for your partner, for the place that you sit at work, for this podcast room, for your car, for your coffee mug, for your Monday morning meetings. Anything, as I said, that you've experienced in the past will be stored up here as a memory. But because we've experienced it, we also have an associated emotion connected to that person or object or thing or various places at various times. And so what happens is when we get up in the morning, our senses plug us into the environment. The environment's made up of people and objects and things at various times and places. And so as we go about our day, often we go through a very routine set of actions and behaviours. And we go to the same places and we see the same people and we do the same thing at the exact same time. What happens is that the environment starts, because we have an associated emotion with things, it starts to influence how we think and how we feel. For example, if I was to think about my boss, I'm just giving an example, it's a fictitious example, I might feel fear because the last interaction I had with them was that they were maybe, giving me feedback about something. And so now when I see my boss, my body starts to automatically feel the fear. And so what happens is we become victims to our environment because we are allowing the external world. So we come to work, we're stuck in traffic, and your colleague says to you, what's up? And you say, I'm having a bad day. And they ask you why you're having a bad day. And you can say, oh, well, I was stuck in traffic, I saw the news. And what we're saying is something external outside of us is having power over how we think and how we feel. So the whole premise of this course is to start looking at that and changing that. So we say that your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So 2 people in the same office can be sitting next to one another, experiencing completely different personal realities based on how they are thinking, how they are acting, and how they are feeling. And so what we're trying to say here is that if we wanted to make a change, if we wanted to actually start creating a different personal reality, we actually need to change.
So Vish, am I right in thinking that it's almost, rather than the environment, it's our memory of the meaning that we make of that environment.
Yeah.
So individual memories can be completely different, but then when we show up in that environment, our experience of what we do with that and how we experience change is impacted.
Yeah, and it's usually based on a past experience.
Yeah.
I heard an example of something like this where there were two people who'd been in a war and they both experienced a similar incident where one of their closest friends unfortunately got killed in action, and one person sort of said that was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through and life's not worth living. It's just so horrible what's happened. And then another person saw that as being the most meaningful thing that had happened because he just was like, you don't know what's going to happen in life, and so therefore life is such a gift and you've got to make the most of life and you can't waste any time. So that would that be an example of how a similar incident you could attach very different meaning to it?
That's right, yeah. And so those two people would have very different emotions connected to the thoughts. And so it's all connected where we say that whenever you have a thought, your body makes a chemical to make you feel the way that you are thinking. So if we are, for example, thinking unhappy thoughts, our body is making chemicals that make us feel unhappy. It's like a chemical cocktail. Unknowingly, what happens though over time is when we are experiencing emotions created by the hormones of stress, so things like judgment, frustration, anger, guilt, fear, what happens is that those chemicals, especially created by the hormones of stress, are highly addictive. It's like you get a shot of adrenaline, like you've had a shot of coffee, and it kind of wakes you up, and then you pay attention to what's causing you to feel that way. And what happens is over time, unknowingly, and it's very unconscious, we start to get addicted to that rush of adrenaline, and unknowingly we start to seek out those situations or similar things that can actually give us that same chemical hit. So we might say, oh, it's my colleague's fault that, that I feel frustrated, for example. But take that colleague away and put another one in, you're not getting the fix of that adrenaline rush of a feeling that frustration. What do you think is going to happen?
Seek it out.
You're going to seek it out because you unconsciously need that rush of adrenaline. So when people start to become conscious of this, then they realise, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I have been doing this all these years. And this is something that I could really resonate with because I realised that was what I was doing in the past. And the other thing we tell people is that 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of unconscious programs or subconscious programs. So we're a set of memorised emotions, unconscious emotional reactions, automatic habits, and hardwired beliefs and perceptions that function just like a computer program. And so what happens is we might want to make a change in ourselves. The 5% of our conscious mind wants to make a change, but it's going against this 95% subconscious, which is usually stored in our body. And so can you see why it's so hard if we want to change, to make a change?
So Vish, could an example be if you you end up in an abusive relationship and you're determined not to, but then you tend to keep going back to the same types of people?
Yeah. So if you're unconscious to that whole process, you may not realise that that's exactly what you're doing. So part of what we teach is also to make people conscious of the unconscious, become aware, which means they're going to activate their frontal lobe. And so the frontal lobe is the part of our brain that can allow us to observe ourselves. And what happens over time is if we're unconscious to the process of, like, say, an event happens in our life, the stronger the emotional reaction you have to that event, the more you narrow your focus, your brain takes a snapshot and stores it as a long-term memory. And the more traumatic the event, the more you've etched it. So unknowingly what happens is because of survival, we go back to thinking about that event. And unfortunately what happens is the body doesn't know the difference between a real life experience that's creating that emotion or the emotion we're fabricating by thought alone. So if it's a very stressful event, the body is under stress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And as we know, no organism was built to live in survival for extended periods of time. You know, sooner or later it will break down. So this is why we can see a lot of, chronic health problems also happening. So by knowing all this information, when you are firing and wiring the same thought over and over again, what happens is it hardwires a neural pathway and then it becomes the automatic program. So to break that cycle, we give people tools to break the cycle of that, to become conscious and break the cycle of that. But we also get them to create a blueprint or a vision of who they would like to be. So how does this new person think? How does this new person act? So for example, in a work setting, if I wanted to be an inspirational leader, how would I turn up to meetings? How would I speak to my colleagues and my team? How would I conduct myself in a challenging situation? And you start to mentally rehearse that. It's no different to what Olympic athletes do, where they mentally rehearse their moves, and top CEOs do the same thing. Because what happens is as you're mentally rehearsing it and you're in your sort of imagination, you're imagining that it's happening. As I said, the body doesn't know the difference. It thinks it's actually happening now, and you are actually creating new neural pathways as if it's already happened. So by doing this over and over and over again, you can actually change your personality. So you can actually biologically, neurologically change yourself to literally become someone new. And understanding what's happening in your brain, understanding what's happening in your body, I think gives people the understanding that can make it more tangible.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is brought to you by my weekly newsletter, which is Donna's Balcony Views newsletter. This is a short weekly free newsletter that I write with the theme of building resilience and improving well-being. It contains 2 things I've experienced, 2 things I've learnt from others, such as speakers, podcasts, books or articles, and a personal story from someone else about what they do for their resilience or their well-being.
What I love about your newsletter, Donna, is it's really bite-sized and it's extremely easy to read. In a couple of minutes, I've got some great resources and some little tips that I might try. And I read it this morning again, and it just gave me some idea of what I could focus on, some morning questions and some evening questions, and I'm really enjoying it.
If you would like to sign up for my weekly newsletter, my free weekly newsletter, go to my personal website, which is www.donnasbalconyviews.com.au, or on Instagram at Donna's Balcony Views. Are you able to share any of the tools with us?
Yeah, so one of the tools we teach it's a breathing tool. It was sort of created by an institute called the Heart Math Institute, and they've done a lot of work with first responders, US Navy SEALs, the military. They work a lot with them because those people have to go into very stressful situations and be able to think very clearly. And so the premise of this breathing tool, and they've done a lot of research in this area, there's a lot of peer-reviewed articles in this, where this breathing tool works on the heart. So it's called heart-focused breathing. And what happens is, what they realised is when we're feeling very emotional,
activated,
driven by hormones of stress triggered. When we're feeling frustration and overwhelm and anger and those types of things, the heart beats in a very erratic way, what we call incoherent way. And they've known this since the 1800s, that the heart actually sends signals to the brain. And so what happens is, if you're feeling an erratic feeling, that erratic signal is going to your brain, and then your brain becomes incoherent. And you're not able to think clearly, you're not able to solve a problem, you're not able to face a challenging situation. So that's what we call cortical inhibition. So to overcome that, we teach them this tool, and I did a talk for the Engineers Australia, and they had about 130 engineers there, and we all did this tool together because it actually helps to put you into a brainwave state called alpha brainwave state, which is the creative state. And engineers often have to face challenging situations. They have to solve wicked problems. And so it helps to put them in a state where they can start to think of creative solutions.
Is it something that we can do on the podcast that you can
I can walk you through an example, yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So as I'll explain to you, what will happen is when you start to use this breathing tool, your heart starts to beat in a more coherent fashion, which means a more coherent signal is going to the brain, and then the brain starts to work better. And the more you practice it, the more you will create this state of being called coherence, where all your functions in the body start to come back into balance. So it's a very good tool to use when you feel like, your wheels are spinning or you feel overwhelmed, you can't find a solution to a problem.
I was just talking to someone yesterday about exactly this. He was very, very angry about a particular thing going on, and he said it's just so all-consuming. He couldn't focus on anything creative. So it would be very helpful for him and many other people to find out what exactly do you do if you're feeling like that.
Exactly. And in a corporate setting, I tell people, for example, project managers or people involved in change, they're going to come up against, for example, resistance. They're going to come up against tight deadlines. Curveballs can come at you at any time. So often what happens is people will turn to some other external substance or whatever it is to try and manage that stress. However, sometimes those things are maybe not as healthy for our body as we'd like it to be. So this is something that can be used as an alternative. In fact, they use it in the Mayo Clinic. Have you heard of the Mayo Clinic?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a very rich resource and well known for people to access as a resource.
Yeah. They use them when they go into a meeting. They often do this technique before they start the meeting, and usually they finish the meeting before, the slot that they've allocated, and that everyone comes out happy because they're in a state of being where they actually can have a proper conversation, even if there's conflict. You're not getting caught up in the emotions of it, but you're able to see things objectively. So, yeah, really helpful.
Well, let's give it a go.
Yeah, sure.
I think we could both do with
I'm ready.
some of this heart
We are your
focused
willing
breathing.
guinea pigs.
Absolutely.
So I'll walk you through what we're going to do, and then I'll actually take you through the guided part. So this particular technique I'm teaching you is called the heart lock-in technique, and it'll start off with me asking you to take some deep breaths. So you put your attention in the heart, in your actual physical heart area, or in the center of your chest, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then what you do is you take really deep, slow breaths into the heart or the center of your chest and out. So the ideal count is 5 counts in and 5 counts out. So I'll get you to do that for a few rounds, and then what I'll do is I'll ask you to bring up a feeling of gratitude. Now, the reason I'm asking you to bring up a feeling of gratitude is because their research has shown when you're feeling emotions like appreciation or gratitude and things like that, it actually amplifies the level of coherence in your heart. And the last part of this exercise is I'll ask you to radiate that feeling of gratitude from the heart to the rest of your body and then out into the space around you. Okay. All right.
Hey,
so
let's go.
Sitting in a comfortable position and placing your attention in the center of your chest, and we're going to just do some heart-focused breathing. So let's take a really deep breath into the heart for the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take another deep breath into the heart for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just relax and breathe normally for now. And now I'm going to ask you to bring up that feeling of gratitude or appreciation. So it could be gratitude for a loved one, or for even your pet, or even a special place like a sunset at the beach. And now we're going to breathe in this feeling of gratitude, really filling up our heart with this gratitude for the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Expanding our heart with gratitude for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just keep filling up your heart with this gratitude, really deep, slow breaths, filling yourself up. And do that for a few rounds. And now take your last breath in of gratitude and breathe out. And now just relax and breathe normally. And from this space, I'd like you to radiate that feeling of gratitude from your heart to the rest of your body and then out into the space around you. So radiating out this feeling of gratitude. You're so full of this gratitude, you can now give it out. And rest in this feeling of gratitude and feel grateful for this moment, but most of all, feel grateful for being you. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes, come back to the room. Would anyone like to share what you were experiencing?
Oh, I feel fantastic.
So Donna and I both, now that I've opened my eyes, we both decided to put our hands on our hearts. Yeah. And I think when I've done breathing exercises like that, that really helps to really focus where you want to put your attention, just putting your hand on that place. So that was interesting. And even taking my hand away, I can still feel that slight pressure on my heart, which stays, with me somatically as I then can talk.
And it's so true that when you're thinking about something to be grateful for, you can't feel fear or overwhelm or anger, and I can see why that is such an integral part to the exercise.
That's right. So imagine you're faced with a stressful situation at work. You can't think your way out, or you can't think your way into coherence, and you can't sometimes think your way out to find a solution at that when you're in that what we call high beta brainwave state. So that's when your brainwaves move up into this really high beta brainwave state, and your brain starts firing very incoherently, and your attention goes from this person to that object, to that thing, to this meeting. And it just, I'm sure we've all felt that before, that you can't really think straight. So this is the perfect time to do this exercise, because you're dropping out of the thinking neocortex and putting your attention on the heart, and now bringing it back here. That is going to slow the brain waves down back again and become help your brain to become more coherent. And then when you revisit that situation, you'll be able to hopefully look at it from a different perspective and be able to look for a creative solution.
I think this is one of the things that a lot of people are, they're really looking for that evidence base. When you think about something like gratitude, we know in popular psychology there's, people say, oh, just be grateful, or they say, but actually to understand some of the rigour and the evidence behind that, I think is really important to some of our listeners.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you find having that neuroscience to back it up is helpful for people who are maybe more sceptical or just say, oh, it's just gratitude.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I myself am a very sceptical person, coming from an engineering background, very analytical. And so I was never a person that could meditate or do any of those things, because I never understood the meaning behind it. Whereas Dr. Joe's work is the first time that I've actually been able to understand the meaning behind why I am doing something. And for example, even one of the techniques we teach is a mental rehearsal, which is like a meditation almost. But the purpose is to slow your brain waves down enough to go from the high beta into low beta, but then eventually going into what we call alpha and theta waves, because then you're bypassing the analytical mind and going into the subconscious mind where all those hardwired beliefs and attitudes are. And that's how we can really change ourselves, by getting into that. So when I understood why I'm doing this mental rehearsal or meditation, it's because I actually want to mentally rehearse while I'm in the subconscious mind who I really want to be, creating new neural pathways to become that person and creating new chemicals in my body, teaching my body what it feels like to be that new person.
So I hope everyone listening, people listening, if you're listening, give that exercise a go that we just did.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
So Vish, you were mentioning to me that these tools and models and this program are very heavily used around the world in quite stressful environments such as prisons, with Indigenous communities that have experienced a lot of trauma. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so powerful for those particular communities?
Yeah, so this program has been running, I think, for the past few years in prisons, starting off in Mexico. I think they started off in a women's prison, and now it's now been rolled out to other prisons, and now also in the US as well. And the reason why they started it there is because the conditions in the women's prison in Mexico were just it's unbelievable, right? The women sleep standing up, and there's so many of them in one cell. Yeah. So you can imagine the conditions that are there. However, this program has transformed so many of them to start looking at the situation that they're in a different perspective. And what's actually happened is, and I think it comes from the warden who's very open to this, the culture has started to shift in the prison, and the women are starting to look after one another and look out for one another, care for one another. In fact, those that hadn't come for the training were asking what's going on because they saw that the other women were starting to bond and communicate better. So it's very, very powerful in shifting mindsets, because obviously they can't change their situation, can they? They're in that cell, but somehow they were able to shift their perspective and mindset to find gratitude or some little piece of joy or happiness in what they do, and they meditate together. They do all these exercises together. So it's incredibly powerful to see that. And the same where they have done these programs in Indigenous tribes around the world. The Lakota and Hopi tribe, I think, is where they started first. Again, Pine Ridge, again, very terrible conditions, a lot of trauma that people have gone through. And why is this work so important is because people do not need to feel that their past defines their future. So if you keep yourself stuck in the past, you end up living a life that perhaps you're not as happy as you'd like to be. In this program, we try to show people that the past doesn't have to define who they are, and it doesn't matter what happened in the past. You can change as a person, and you can define who you want to be and what kind of future you want to create for yourself. And in that way, they slowly start to heal what has, the trauma or whatever has happened in the past. They do this program for war veterans as well, again, who have gone through so much trauma. And so I've been privileged to run my first program for an Indigenous community here in Perth, and hopefully that's the start of many more to come for that. But I'm also obviously still delivering it for corporate organisations as well, because it can have tremendous benefit there as well.
And Vish, you started with the example of change and how as human beings we struggle with change. And I'm just thinking of a really practical example like, we have to move desks and how attached people get to desks at a workplace. So, yes, I really recognise those really traumatic events that it also has useful, and profound effects by the sound of it. But if someone's just in a workplace where there's some of those things that seem quite innocuous and yet have massive impacts for people, how have you seen some of these tools actually support things like moving desks?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, every object that we've interacted with and people and things like that make up our environment. So we have a neurological network with it, and therefore a feeling or an emotion connected to it. And that is part of the reason why we get so attached, and that even moving a desk can feel like it's a huge trauma for us, because it's now creating discomfort. And as human beings, we change, I think in the past would have meant danger, survival, because it's unknown. So whenever there's an unknown, people start to feel anxious because they can't anticipate what's going to happen next. So this is where the program sort of starts to get people to notice that they're feeling this anxiety around this situation, they're having these thoughts around this situation. Okay, is there another way that we can look at this? Can we look at this as an opportunity? Moving desks, I'm going to move to a new place. It's going to be exciting. I'm going to maybe be meeting new people because I'm sitting with new people, and perhaps the conditions are going to be even better. I'm just giving some examples of how people can start to look at it, because being stuck and feeling miserable about a desk, it's not harming anyone else. It's only affecting ourselves. So I guess we have to ask ourselves, do we want to continue to feel this way, or do we want to feel empowered to actually make a change and make a choice about how we want to feel? And so even with AI, there's so much anxiety around that. People are not sure what it's going to mean for them, a lot of fear. So again, can we look at AI more as an opportunity and work with it to actually help us in what we do, as opposed to feeling like we're in competition with us? Because obviously AI is never going to replace emotional intelligence, resilience,
critical thinking.
Yeah, all of those things. We still need human beings for that. And, you know, I teach this unit at ECU where we talk about work and career, and we're talking about, you know, what employers are looking for, and the qualities that they're looking for nowadays are these human traits, which is emotional intelligence, resilience, adaptability, communication. So, and this program is perfect for that, to teach people to do that. But these are not qualities that AI can give us. So they know that they can always teach people technical skills, but having these innate human skills is very desirable for employers nowadays.
So anyone listening, and us as well, the next time we have a kind of negative thought or something uncertain happens in our life, we can give this a go and think about it, or, you know, how can I change my thinking?
Yeah.
And be aware of it.
It's not about positive thinking in the sense, sometimes that can shift to what we call toxic positivity, where we think we have to be, but we're not honouring our feelings.
Yes.
So when you have an emotion to an event, that's a part of being human.
Yeah.
Right? Those chemicals actually last in your body. Can you guess how long when you have a reaction to something?
I think it's 90 seconds.
Yeah. 90 seconds to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know, like children will, you know, often chuck a tantrum, but the next minute they're out running again because they've kind of just felt the emotion and then just let it go. So we don't want people to feel like they have to suppress their emotions. No, feel it. But ask yourself, it's not bad that you react. The question is, how long do you want to react?
Yes.
Because if you allow those emotions to linger for hours or days, it becomes a mood.
Yes.
And then if it goes on for weeks or months, it becomes your temperament. And then for years, it becomes your personality trait. That's another thing that we teach as well. That's what we call the refractory period of chemicals. So it's a choice that we all can make. Yeah.
Well, Vish, it's great to have one really sort of concrete tool for our listeners to go away with, and to hear some of the ways that you approach, you know, how to, it is rewiring, reprogramming the brain, but also what I hear it doing is not dismissing our emotions, it's including them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming along, and I've learnt something very helpful as well. And in the show notes, we'll put how to get into contact with Joe Dispenza's work and you as well, if people are interested in doing the program. But I think it's great that we've shared a couple of the tools and ways of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually have a course coming up in September. So if anyone's interested, they can reach out to me on my website. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Vish. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, Di, speaking to Vish, it reminded me of our seasons in the podcast, because she shared her personal story of courage and resilience, and through getting through that and everything that she's learnt and gone through, she's now helping others build their courage and resilience in her life. So it's quite an inspirational story.
It is, isn't it? And I love how that she's using the evidence-based stuff that has been tried and tested in, you know, prison work and Indigenous communities, and the fact that West Australians could now be benefiting from that, I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to go home and practice that breathing technique.
We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family.